Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. Episode 302, something a little more recent this week by request as we cover the new Rivers of Nihil album that just came out last year. It was in my top 50. I know you enjoyed it as well. This is going to be an interesting discussion from a band we have not talked about in long form here on the podcast. But before we talk about all things Rivers, how are you, my friend?
Very good, very good. This was interesting. This is an album that I kind of struggled with when it came out, and I listened to it a bunch of times and earlier in the year, and then I really dug into it. It was a very interesting counterpoint to Rush because I kind of listened to both in tandem for the most part.
Two very proggy albums, but couldn't sound any more different.
No, different vocal styles for sure, and I didn't catch a lot of saxophone on the Rush album. So,
giveth God taketh away, I guess, one of those things.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm good, ready to discuss this a rare current album for us.
Yeah, it's nice to do the current stuff every once in a while. We sprinkle them in every now and again. But before we get there, a couple of things I wanted to mention. The first, a lot of people really seem to enjoy the newest Omnium Gatherum album, which came out last year. All of a sudden, they dropped a new single, seemingly out of the blue. It's called Moongold. I think it was recorded during the same sessions. I almost get the sense that it was like a B-side or a companion song to this album from last year. Really good. Really, really cool single. I like when bands just surprise you and all of a sudden it's just like, here's some new music that you weren't expecting. And these guys are obviously the model of consistency at this point. I didn't go crazy over the last album, but a lot of people did, and I certainly think it was melodic and catchy, and I think this was in the same vein. Not as heavy as some of their prior stuff, but definitely some good songs on there. So check out Moongold. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, that album was one of the surprises for me. So I just went and grabbed the single, and I will give that a listen and report back.
Very good. Very good. And then I wanted to just mention one other thing that caught my ear. There are some times where you'll get a recommendation and you have no idea what to expect. I was listening to the Harsh Vocals podcast. We have a group chat with several other folks that do metal podcasts, and they had recommended an album by a one-person band, I guess you'll say. They come from Belgium. The album, the album is called Vampiric War and Blood. It came out last year. The musician or the title of the artist is called Bloedman, Bloedmaan. And this is black metal, but the entire album is a tribute to Castlevania. So this is some really, really interesting stuff. I gave a listen to one of the tracks and I was kind of blown away by how good this was. So I picked up the album. I want to listen to it. I'll post one of their tracks this week just because it's so different from some of the stuff that we listen to. But the theming is certainly spot on. So I quite frankly just want to check out more of the stuff. So I'm going to post something this week. I know black metal isn't your favorite genre, but the theming is there, so there's a chance you may actually really enjoy this one.
Yeah, I feel like Castlevania can make anything palatable for me, especially when it has to do with the music. It's just like one of the best video game series as far as music goes. So that's cool. I'm definitely curious to give that a listen because that is quite odd, but interesting to say the least.
Anything catch your ear this week? I know you had a lot of catching up to do with some stuff.
Yeah, I listened to all the new stuff I was tasked with. So I'll tell you the albums, and you can ask me what you want to hear my thoughts on. I listened to Edenbridge, Soen, Creator, and Megadeth.
I am particularly curious about the two thrash albums. Talk to me about Megadeth and Creator. Any thoughts, good or bad, on either one?
I enjoyed the Megadeth album, and I definitely echo your sentiments that it really is kind of like a march through time, so to speak. I got more of a kind of euthanasia era Megadeth vibe from this album, although there are some throwbacks to a little bit of the older, like 80s, early 90s Megadeth. But to me, it had a little bit more of the melodic vibe to it than the last handful of albums that were really thrashy, in my opinion. And for that reason, I think I enjoyed this a little bit more than I might have otherwise, because I like that, especially that euthanasia / cryptic writings era of Megadeth, where they kind of embraced a little bit more of like a proggy melodic kind of vibe in concert with the thrashiness. So, but I was particularly impressed with the song, The Last Note, which kind of was like lyrically almost like a farewell song, yes, to the band, and then followed by the cover of Metallica's Ride the Lightning, which all I could think of is like, I don't think this is good. I don't think this is bad. It's just surreal hearing this song performed by Megadeth of all, like, covers are one thing, but to hear a Megadeth version of a Metallica song is just wild. It's not something I ever thought I would hear.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I've heard the original so many times, as I mentioned, that anything else was going to be off-putting. But I don't hate the concept, and I don't think the execution was terrible. So kudos to them. And obviously, it is a bonus track, right? This is not part of the album proper, so I don't even know that you evaluate it as part of the whole package for the album. But listen, when you penned Rust in Peace, you can do whatever you want, in my opinion. You get a pass.
Yeah, and it's not like, it's not just like, oh, we're going to cover the song. I mean, he obviously had a hand in writing it, so I mean, I think he has every right to add this to the album. And I think in a weird way, it's almost like a cathartic thing where it's like, Dave had so much griping and angst over being removed from Metallica, and so I'd like to think that making this the last song on the last Megadeth album is almost like his way of saying, like, he's made peace with it all and he's come full circle, and hopefully he can rest easy knowing that, Megadeth was, they're not as big of a band as Metallica, that, no metal band is, honestly, not even Iron Maiden, I think, at this point. I think Metallica really just is going to go down as like the biggest, most well-known metal band ever. But there are certainly a ton of people that are bigger Megadeth fans, myself included. So even though those particular 3 or 4 first Metallica albums were iconic, I feel like Megadeth stayed the course for so many years, where they kept making consistently good thrash metal albums, whereas Metallica, there's so much like consternation when it comes to Load and Reload and Saint Anger and even like the albums that followed, that I think they reined it back in a little bit towards the old school, but still it wasn't what the diehards were looking for. I think Megadeth kind of kept true to what kind of band they were, and they released a ton more material too than Metallica did. So, I think Dave can be happy with his legacy, or at least he should be. The new Creator album I really enjoyed as well.
I thought it was very melodic. I don't mean to cut you off, but I thought there was a real chance that you were going to enjoy this one because the melodies were there and the hooks were there to go along with the traditional thrash style, obviously.
Yeah, it all blended together to make a really enjoyable listening experience. And so I enjoyed the last Creator album as well. I feel like they're doing a great job. We posted a video from them the other day on social media from this album, and it sounds like it's getting a lot of positive reviews and comments and stuff. So I'm glad I gave that a listen. I have to say, I mentioned to you regarding Soen, I feel like that each release from them is becoming more and more accessible, at least to me. Like there's more melodies and there's more, it's less like, technical prog and more like just kind of something I enjoy listening to, which means that probably the original diehard fans of Soen probably don't like it as much, but I actually tend to enjoy this more.
It's a little, and I have to go back to it. I found it to be a little derivative, a little bit like, okay, we've heard this before, but it's really well done. So I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was mixed very, very well. And I thought it was heavy. I thought it was heavier than some of the stuff they had done in the past. So I'm a big fan. I love hearing them live. I look forward to seeing them as early as next week. And we talked about that tour with Dark Tranquillity. That is a really interesting tour because the bands couldn't sound any different, but somehow I feel like if you're a fan of one, you're probably a fan of the other, or at least to some extent.
Yeah, no doubt. I have to say, like, Joel Eklof, the lead vocalist, has such a unique vocal, I feel, and I really like it. I think it sounds different in a way that, like, when you talk about Sleep Token, like, I find that the vocals for Sleep Token also are very unique and very different. I just don't really enjoy his vocals, and that is kind of a big part of my disdain or dislike for that band. Like, for me, like, if you can't get past the vocals, it kind of is almost a lost cause for me. But Soen, not so much in that category. And they're such a good live band. They sound so crisp and so just like very studio-esque on live, which I think is a real compliment. So that, and I'll just quickly mention the Eden Bridge, which was my favorite of those 4 albums that I listened to. More of the same from them, but for me, that's fine. I am a big fan of their brand of symphonic power metal. So, just keep it coming. I love Sabine's vocals, always have. I think I first heard her, it was either doing guest vocals with Power Quest, or I'll never forget, you sent me a track, my first Eden Bridge track you sent me years and years and years ago, and it was a duet with DC Cooper.
Wow, you're right. I forgot about that tune. I got to go back and listen to that.
Yep. I think it was called Red Ball and Blue Sky, and it was from their third album, Aphelion, which came out in 2003. So that was kind of my first, I think the first Eden Bridge song I ever heard, but I also remember hearing Sabine do vocals with Power Quest and just thinking that she had a really nice voice. So a lot of good stuff. We're off and running. Beyond the Black is still my album of the year so far. I've gone back and listened to that like a half dozen times. I really like it. The Flood is song of the year for me so far. But oh my God, we have still so much to cover. I already have 4 promos of albums queued up that haven't come out yet, including the Iron Savior cover albums that we've discussed a few times now. So yeah, lot to look forward to. We'll see if Beyond the Bridge. This similar thing happened a couple of years ago. They released their last album in January, and so it got like a jump start on everything else. And so I just went back to it throughout the whole year, and it remained like a high pick for me. I think it was in my top 5 or top 10 that year. So I'm guessing this will probably be similar. It probably won't be my album of the year, but it'll probably stay in that top tier. But we'll see. It's currently January 25th, so there's a lot of time for things to change.
So we go from Germany and Europe back to the U.S. We come to Rivers of Nihil. Now, this is a band... originally, I think that they were classified as death metal when they came on the scene around 2009, 2010, that era. But at the same time, I never really considered them a straight-up death metal band. I thought they just had too many other things going on with their sound to pigeonhole them into a classic death metal band. So whether you want to call them progressive death metal or whether you want to call them technical death metal, whatever you want to call them, I always found that they were different than a lot of the death metal bands that have been doing their thing for the last 15 years. I don't claim to be an expert in the genre, but I know that this is different than that stuff when I hear it, right? And I was happy that I finally got to see them live last year. They were a band that had toured quite extensively, but I never got a chance to see them. The dates just never aligned. But I have been following this band really since the beginning, and to see their progression, some of the change from album to album is really something to behold. And I thought that for many, the success that they enjoyed with their last release was really well-deserved. This last album, the self-titled album, which, for those that don't know, came out May 30th of last year, really kind of put the band on a lot of people's radars. They charted really well, not only in the US, but in Canada and throughout Europe with this album, which for a technical progressive death metal band is all you need to know. Really genre influencing, genre defining, and really becoming some of the torchbearers for the genre. What was your first exposure to this band, and how familiar were you with them prior to this last album?
My exposure was minimal. I believe you had some songs on a playlist or two. Our friend Justin Westmoreland, who requested this episode, this album, started sending me the singles from this album before the album came out, and it seemed like he was really excited about what he was hearing before the album was released in full. And so I remember hearing some of the singles ahead of time. Looking back, House of Light was released in February, and then followed by American Death in March. So I remember listening to those tunes on his recommendation and thinking, all right, this is progressive death metal, is not going to be a top genre for me, but I mean, I definitely understood the appeal. And then fast forward a little bit, and the Night Flight Orchestra, unfortunately, ends up canceling their Prog Power appearance. And Glenn had said in so many words, I'm going to replace them with a band that describes how I feel about having to replace them. And he went with a much more, I guess guttural would be an interesting way to describe it, a much more guttural sounding band. And not only that, but like placed them on the lineup. Who was it that they followed them? It was like two of the heaviest bands that I could remember playing back to back. I'm sorry? Was
it them and Ancients, if memory serves? But I
it might have been. I'm pulling up the roster now, but I just remember thinking, no, it was Be'lakor.
Oh, even yeah, that's there you go.
Yeah, like wow, like it literally was Be'lakor and Rivers of Nihil sandwiched between Majestica and Project. It like talk about a wild run of genres, followed by a Orden Ogan performance without a singer.
Oh man, you want to talk about Snakebit? I mean, but listen, I thought these guys in Be'lakor were both fantastic, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, but I mean, can you name a heavier 2.5 hours of prog power? Like, that's usually, I feel like, Glenn tries to make the lineup so that there's some like, you're not like doing too much of one thing in a row. Like, you're not going to get like, Gamma Ray followed by Halloween followed by Stradivarius. Like, you got to pepper in your Devin Townsends and your Pain of Salvations and really try to hit a nice balance. But when you have, visa issues and cancellations, there's only so much you can do. And this, I think, ended up being a really well-received replacement. Justin and his wife, Verna, chose to hold their sponsorship with Night Flight and kind of transfer it over to Rivers. And they, ended up befriending some of the members of the band, and then the band came back to our Airbnb and hung out with us one night, and they were really a super bunch of guys, like had a really great conversations about where everybody was from and how they all got together. And that was one of my favorite parts of Prog Power last year. Since the Courtyard has been a non-factor, the after parties have been a lot more mellow and spread out, and that's been my favorite after party we've had since the courtyard ended. So that was kind of cool. And if anyone's listening and being like, why didn't we know about that? We didn't really actually invite anyone because it was at an Airbnb. So like it was kind of a small group of people. If you were there, congratulations. You're in the inner circle.
And if you know, you know. That said, as I remember, these singles come out, the album comes out. As I said, it got some really nice exposure when it came out. And for those that don't know, Adam Biggs on vocals and bass, Andy Thomas on guitars and vocals, Brody Utley, guitars, piano, keyboards, programming, etc., and Jared Klein, who is just an absolute monster on drums. So it is always fascinating to me that a band can produce a sound like this. And they did have a little bit of help with some guest personnel with the saxophone and the cello and the banjo and whatnot. But for the most part, you got four guys.
Shout out to Patrick Corona for that alto sax. Like it really adds a whole other dynamic to this album.
100%. But I say that because it's really four guys that make this complete wall of sound, which is incredible to me, because there are bands that have six people in the band that don't sound anything like this. And so kudos to them. I think these albums must be a complete struggle to mix and get the sound just right, but they somehow managed to do that. Before we get into this album in its entirety, talking about, song by song, I have to ask you if your opinion of the album changed when you were kind of tasked with listening to it a half dozen times or so in a given week. Like, did things change? I know you listened to it a lot, spaced out over 2025, but I think there's something different between listening to something in a short period of time over and over again, and then hearing something over and over again, but over a longer period.
Yeah, this made me think of you a lot in the sense that, you have said in the past there are certain albums that you have to kind of be in the right mood for. And for me, this is definitely one of those albums because it's just so I just combined heavy and dense and said hence. It's a very hence album. It's just like, there were times where I was like listening to it while working and I actually had to like lower the volume because it was just like, it's a powerful, heavy album. And so like, while it's not my favorite type of music in the world, there are things about it that I really enjoy. I enjoyed some of the softer spots where there's clean vocals. It doesn't happen a ton, but when it does happen, it's like a kind of welcome break from the onslaught. The alto sax that I mentioned earlier, I think just adds this almost like hauntingly jazzy kind of vibe to a type of music that I don't think you would be used to hearing that. And then seeing them with the in the live setting with the alto sax player, I think just put the live performance over the top. I mean, how often do you see that? I think the last time I saw a saxophone player on stage at Prague Power was at Thank You Scientist. Very different band.
Yeah, I'll say.
But yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I definitely, it definitely was more enjoyable the more I got into it, but not by a ton. I will say, like, I didn't end up listening to it like a half dozen more times and being like, oh wow, this was a 5 for me, and now it's an 8.5. Like, it wasn't that drastic, but
gotcha.
But I mean, again, like, sometimes I need to listen to stuff that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and this is certainly it. But there's definitely aspects that I enjoy, but man, sometimes it's just so heavy that I'm not really in so much of an angsty mood that like I need to put this on just to like rage out. It's interesting. I actually, I think I put on Dragonland the other day right after I was done listening to Rivers of Nihil because I just needed to like pivot in the complete opposite direction. And I had just heard that Dragonland was added to the Mad with Power lineup. So I was just like, yeah, there's a band I haven't listened to in a while. So I put on some Dragonland, and it was made for a very interesting palate cleanser because it was just nothing like what I had just listened to with Rivers.
Well, I mean, I talk about that frequently, not to go off on a tangent, but I find that the contrast between what I listen to has kept things fresh over the years. I just cannot listen to prog or power metal for 6 hours straight anymore. And so being able to jump around or being able to listen to something like this and then go to a band like Porcupine Tree and then go listen to that Castlevania black metal album or whatever it is, I think that keeps things fresh. I think it keeps things interesting. And if an album is good, it's going to rise to the top and it's going to be something I go back to. And if it's something that isn't, then maybe I don't play it nearly as much. But I find that jumping around between styles makes me really appreciate all the good music that is out there. So with that said, let's get into it. You know, you had mentioned earlier that first single, The Suborbital Blues. Believe it or not, this track was released in 2023. So you want to talk about anticipation. This came out almost 2 years before the album would ultimately come out. And it starts with this really kind of ethereal vibe with almost a genty style to it, but it won't last long. You talk about those contrasting vocal styles. I think that it is really on full display with this track because you've got these emotional growls with these beautiful cleans, and it's fascinating to me that they can sound so good together. But I think this track is a really good example of that. And while those vocal styles go back and forth, the drums are just beating through your head on a track like this. It's not blazing fast, but it is brutally heavy. And then to your point, those smooth saxophone sounds, especially on the back half of this song, make for a hell of an opening track.
Yeah, well said. This is I think one of the heaviest songs on the album, like right from the get-go. So I don't remember hearing it when it first was released, or maybe I heard it and forgot about it, and then I heard it again when the album actually came out. It seems like they were kind of dropping singles for the good part of 2 years before the album came out, because then the Criminals single would come out in April of 2024. So like it really was like a slow burn, I think, to the album being released. I kind of agree on all points about the song itself. Just absolutely murderous drums. It starts out with clean vocals, but it does not last. And these are some really like brutal growls, I think. But yet there is kind of a kind of symphonic nature to it, because I think of that the alto sax. It kind of adds a little bit of a kind of a weird dark jazz kind of vibe. But I thought this was a pretty good way to open things up. Not one of my favorite songs on the album. I think it's just I'm probably going to use this phrase a lot, but it was just a little much. I know that's a way I've heard people from Long Island described as a little much. But I think this is the song I've heard the most from this album in the last 2 years, I guess, or since it's been released. At least according to my iTunes, I've listened to it like a dozen times.
Nice. We move ahead to Dustman, and I think that of all the tracks on the album, believe it or not, if I had to be hypercritical, it's probably my least favorite on the album, which is interesting because it's so forward in terms of the track listing. The drums and the bass drive this tune so much, and it reminds me a lot of Orbit Culture with those blast beats that just permeate this entire track. The verses are really powerful, especially with that low end mixed with the growls. Really, really heavy stuff. The song itself, faster than the opener, more frenetic, not as deliberate. It's in your face. And one of the biggest compliments that I can give this band is that when you're listening to studio recordings, you don't often feel the music. In a live setting, you feel the music. This band, you actually feel the music when you're listening to it. And this is a prime example of that. Kudos to them, because it's hard to replicate that on a studio recording. The bridge on Dustman is really proggy, almost spacey, Again, not my favorite tune, but I really appreciate the energy of this track.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If I had to describe this song with an emoji, it would be the one with the head exploding.
Yeah.
Because it's a very relentless song with just like heavy riffage and heavy drumming and heavy vocals, and it's just a heavy as hell song. If you're looking for like a workout tune or just something to blow off steam to, I feel like this is a good track for that. I feel like the album will kind of chill out a little bit, and that's where I think I start to kind of perk up a little bit. But right now, it's like the onslaught is a little bit overwhelming for me.
Yeah, the second half of this album has a bit of a different feel, and we'll get there, but I actually agree with you. Whereas the third track, Criminals, which is something I'm well vested in, has this kind of subdued bass and drums at the beginning, but it's really short-lived. The song itself, again, just features some really proficient drums and bass work. It reminds me a lot of a Greek band that we've not talked about called Wastefall. Wastefall were like these Pain of Salvation clones that came out with a couple of albums in the early 2000s. And although this is heavier, that bass and drum work was really a callback to me to that band. I would be shocked if the guys in Rivers even knew who Wastefall was. But at the same time, as someone who was familiar with both bands, I saw the parallel right away. The contrast on this track between the verses and the chorus is really incredible. Then you have a guitar solo, which is relatively short, relatively simple, but I love the guitar solo on this track. I thought this was a return to form, and much like the first track, very memorable.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite of the first three tracks so far, and I think it's because there's more of those clean vocals in the chorus. But it's still a very heavy song, but it's just not quite as heavy as the last two, and there's a little bit more of a melodic nature to it. You still have those like just intense as hell drumming, but I like this song. I feel like we're headed in a good direction here. I wanted to mention something to you I completely forgot about, but Knops is really starting to pay attention to the podcast closely again now that he's settled in his new environs. And so the last few episodes, he's been like listening to the albums before we record the episode and kind of giving me his thoughts. And he must have heard when you mentioned that Rivers of Nihil were opening for Queensryche in Europe. And he just said, I'm very confused. Are they going to pull out a new track called Silent Morbidity? And I thought that was pretty funny. So, yeah, shout out to Uncle Knops, who's still with us. What's up, Knops? Criminals was a song that I enjoyed, and I feel like after the first two songs that were just kind of like, I'm like eyes bugging out. I'm like, all right. Like, even though this is still heavy, it's a little bit more palatable for what I prefer. So, that definitely, Criminals is definitely a higher point for me on the album.
I feel like you're going to struggle with Despair Church, the next track, not only because it's the longest track at 6.5 minutes, but there's certain elements on this song that I think you might struggle with. Tell me if I'm correct, and then I'll kind of break down my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of in the same vein as the first two tracks, I think. It's just, again, kind of an onslaught of heavy sound, at least until, like, there's a very almost like funeral dirge kind of ending with, like, the string instruments and stuff like that. This and Water and Time, which is the next track, were Justin Westmoreland's favorite tracks he mentioned to me. Can definitely see that. Justin definitely skews in the heavier realm than I do, even though he definitely is a power metal guy like me.
Justin and I have a very similar taste in music. Obviously, we can appreciate power metal, but we'll send recommendations to each other, on some of the heavier melodic death metal bands and stuff like that. And I love when I get something from him, because when I get it, I know I'm going to enjoy it. I don't even have to listen to it. I just know that it's something I'll enjoy.
He's a man who knows his audience, I will say.
There you go. I like it.
He always sends me good music and also really wild sandwiches made at a deli in New Jersey. If you know, you know. Yeah. I think I enjoyed Despair Church a little bit more than the first two tracks, only because Pippi's back. Only because it did have that kind of chilled out ending, and I like that there was a lot of saxophone in this one, and there's more, like the string instruments at the end. I think it just adds a little bit more layer to the track that the first two tracks were a little bit more of just start to finish, death metal onslaughts.
I thought you might struggle with it because of that really sludgy sound in the beginning. I heard a lot of the ocean and that post-metal sound with this track. But ironically, it's not like that the entire way through. The chorus itself is kind of bright, even though it's short-lived by comparison. And the sludginess kind of moves around a lot. Like I said, for 6.5 minutes, it's not that droning sound the entire way. I like the bridge. It has a really atmospheric sound to it. And I thought that this track really took the listener on kind of a wild ride, especially when the saxophone comes back in. The last minute is a hell of an outro. And what I like about this track is that the amalgamation of sounds really grew on me. And I want to give a shout out to another band. A lot of people raved about the new Between the Buried and Me album. And I'm not going to say that Rivers and Between the Buried and Me sound exactly alike, but they do have a unique ability to blend different styles, even in the same song, in a way that few others can. And so every time you listen to these albums, you hear something different or something new, which I think is something I appreciate, because there's certain albums that you listen to and you say, I've heard this before. I've heard it once. I've heard it 100 times. I can never say that about Between the Buried and Me or anything that Rivers has put out in their discography.
Well said and very fair. This was a song to me that I thought, with the clean vocals, particularly in the chorus, this felt like if there was going to be a commercial track or like something, a radio track from this album that I think really would have worked on like a satellite radio metal station or something like that. Maybe I'm just so detached from like FM radio that I don't know what the hell they play anymore, but this isn't something I would expect to hear on like an FM radio. But there are some metal stations on Sirius XM that I feel like this would, I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually been played. This was the 5th single from the album, but there is kind of, this brought me back to a more like palatable version of melodic death metal where it's really heavy, but I think having cleaner vocals make it just a lot easier to listen to if you're not like, I don't mind death vocals. I just find the death vocals from this band to be really harsh and almost like, to my ear, I'm almost like, ooh, like, it's like, it really hits you. And I think that's kind of the point. But I feel like with this song, you get a little bit of break from that. There's more saxophone, which is really nice. This was one of my favorite songs on the album.
And I don't know that we named it. It's called Water and Time. It's the 5th.
Oh, sorry. I got ahead of myself.
It's all good. It's all good. I had a feeling you might even choose this as your song of the week for the reasons you outlined. It starts off different than some of the other tracks with the use of samples, and it almost sounds like it's going to be this spooky ballad. But it's really melodic, really intriguing, and it's just different than the other tracks on the album. The clean vocals are spectacular and just fit the music perfectly. And then when you have sax solos that kind of channel your inner Kenny G, I'm there for it. I think it sounds really good. The song itself reminds me a bit of Riverside until the growls kind of come in with about 2 minutes to go. Easily a song of the week candidate for me. I love this track. Not the one I'm going with, but I do love this track.
Nice, yeah. I like I said, Justin mentioned it as well. I think this is one of those tracks where I think it just has something that everyone's going to enjoy, and I think that's why I made the comment that it just feels like if there was going to be a radio song from this album, that might have been the one.
I think that makes sense. I definitely hear what you're saying. And as we get to side B, House of Light, the next tune, was another Song of the Week candidate for me. The pacing is similar to the last track, slower, a bit more melancholy, but still maintains that melody throughout the song. And I have to say, on this track more than any others, that blend of saxophone and blast beats is wild. It's just crazy to me that they can put together two sounds that seemingly have nothing to do with each other and make it work. I also on as we talk about House of Light, I like the dual vocals. We hear a lot of cleans and a lot of growls on this album, but rarely are they done together. But on this track, there's actually the layering of both of those sounds, which I thought was a nice thing. And the cleans add that extra level of emotion to them. Great lyrics as well. One of the best choruses that really kind of speaks to me on this album. And when you mentioned melodic death metal before, I hear it predominantly on this track. I actually hear elements of Scar Symmetry on House of Light. Fantastic tune.
Some of those double bass drum like hits, I don't know. Like, I don't understand how someone's body can physically move that fast. It's so impressive.
And
to
to do it live is incredible. To have that much precision in your timing is just absolutely nothing short of amazing. And I'll be honest with you, not that it has anything to do with anything, but Jared Klein is a hell of a guy too. So let's just when you put it all out there, incredible that he has the ability to do this.
Absolutely. This is not one of my favorite tracks, I'll be honest. It's just really, really heavy. There's a brief kind of interlude, I think, where it kind of slows up. And I do like that the band does this on some of the tracks where it just kind of like, it's almost like they're aware of how heavy it is. So it's like, all right, let's just pull it back a little bit. And it's a great spot for some of the instruments to kind of shine besides just the screaming and the drums, which I feel like are the most like noticeable parts. There's so much more going on underneath the surface too. And I feel like particularly on this song, you got like this kind of solo break where you get to hear a little bit more of what's happening. There's almost like an atmospheric vibe at times before it kind of kicks back into the heaviness again. But I still haven't reached my song of the week yet, neither of you. So let's carry on to Evidence.
Again, I know Criminals and I know Evidence. Probably the two things I know best on this album. This Evidence to me might be the heaviest song on the album. This song is brutal. And again, I hear those Orbit Culture vibes with the blast beats that seemingly are everywhere. The groove on this tune is incredibly tight, incredibly powerful. And although the bass lines are not incredibly pronounced, you can again feel that low-end sound driving this thing. The chorus is interesting because it's melodic, but it too is just an oral onslaught on this track. Very intense. The guitar solo is really pronounced as well, which is kind of the only real let-up in the entire song, the solo section. Not my favorite track of the 10, but certainly nothing I would skip.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. Another one that to me is just another really heavy onslaught, and it lets up again a little bit towards the solo part towards the end, but not for super long. Again, I feel like the word of the day is onslaught for me.
We have to cover an onslaught album soon, just because we're alluding to it.
There you go. It could lead to another shirt, which is always we're always looking for ideas for new shirts. I don't know, Criminals and Evidence and American Death, the Justin Kramer day job exchange.
The trifecta, if you will.
Yeah. When a band makes an album about mortgage and interest rates, then we can, I can jump in on that. But
for now, this one is more me. Talk to me about American Death and your thoughts on this one. This one was, I think, one of the more memorable tunes. It came out as the fourth single of the album, and I remember when it was released because it always felt like a bit of an outlier to me.
Yeah, this is going to be my song of the week, mainly just because I really, this is my favorite chorus on the entire album. Like, love the cleans, but it's a very melodic chorus, and I feel like that was a kind of welcome break from the verses that were just super, super heavy and screamy and again, like, just onslaught of drums. But then you get to like this really catchy chorus, and I think that the song just does a really great job of balancing a melodic death metal song with a progressive technical death metal song, and so it's kind of like a best of both worlds situation. And it's the song that just was the most memorable for me because of that chorus. That said, it still has the heavy verses, like I mentioned, plenty of like technical solo work. Overall, just a really cool tune. And I think also the fact that I heard it ahead of time helped too, because it came out a couple of months before the album was released. And so I was familiar with it before the album came out. And so I think when I went back to the album, it probably was one of the more familiar sounding tracks. So why don't we give it a listen, and then we'll come back and get your thoughts on American Death.
That was American Death, and admittedly was going to be my song of the week as well. I'm going to pivot. I'll explain why. But I completely understand why you like that chorus. This song I really didn't care for the first time I heard it. And ever since then, like I said, it was hard for me to articulate why, but it always felt like a bit of an oddball. But I've done a 180 on this track. Sick riff. Some of the best growls on the entire album during the verses, and you can't help yourself but banging your head to the verses and kind of swaying to the infectious chorus, again giving off Scar Symmetry vibes to me. I love this song. I've done a complete 180. I remember not liking it as a single, and now it was going to be my song of the week. You put this song on when you're in a bad mood, and it was almost like soul food. It was that good in terms of improving my mood. But I'm going to go with The Logical End, the next track, as my song of the week. It was going to be my runner-up song of the week, but I wanted to do something different, and I love this track as well. So let's give The Logical End a listen, and then I'll kind of come back and explain to you why I pivoted.
Should we use the metal part for the minute, or should we do the almost dark Kenny G saxophone solo as our minute? I'll let you decide.
That was the logical end. It was going to be my runner-up song of the week, but I want people to hear this. The way this song starts off with those proggy drum fills, it actually reminds me of Stoen and some of their music as of late. But when the band joins, when the rest of the guys kind of join in on top of that, this is a monster tune. It's that mix of atmosphere and technicality on this song that really, really shine. And to your point, I love that saxophone solo with the bass lines underneath. Really, really cool. We heard it with the blast beats. Now we hear it with the bass underneath. I think the band shows their melodic side on the second half of this album, especially with American Death and The Logical End. Hell of a way to kind of close out or kind of get to the last track. I think the back half of this album might even be better than the front half.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, actually. I think there was more that I enjoyed on the back half, particularly with, was it, House of Light and American Death, for those two songs, particularly for me, really, hit the spot. But one of the things I always enjoy is, when a band.
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say, but I'll let you say it.
When they complete the trilogy and they write a song that is named after both the band and the album on which the song appears. Doesn't happen a ton, but when it does, I'm a dork and I find that to be really fun. And Rivers of Nihil, I give them credit for the irony of making the logical end not the last song, making the self-titled title track, whatever you want to call it, Rivers of Nihil, the last track. A penny for your thoughts on this song that is named after both the band and the album.
I knew you were going to say that. I just want to put that on the record. I like this song a lot. It is really reminiscent to me, especially the beginning, of Opeth, with saxophones behind it, which is really cool. I think it's that Mellotron vibe that really brings me back to some of the earlier Opeth material. Beautiful song, super melodic, very ethereal, and a nice way to end the album that was really heavy and in your face. Even though the growls dominate the last minute or so, it is a very memorable end to a very, very good album. And honestly, I listened to this a lot during 2025, but had I listened to it as intently as I did this week, I think it would have been even higher up in my rankings. I think this album is fantastic, and it almost suffered from only listening to it 4 or 5 times, 6 times. But now that I've listened to it well over a dozen times, this is really good stuff and right up my alley.
Yeah, I'm okay with where they landed for me, which was just outside my honorable mentions. It's just a smidge outside of my comfort zone and what I would choose to listen to. That said, though, there's a lot of aspects of it that I really enjoyed. I thought having, again, an alto sax in a technical progressive death metal album was just a really nice touch. When things kind of soften a little bit and there's clean vocals, my ears definitely perked up there. There's definitely stuff that I enjoyed. On a whole, it's not something I would go out of my way to choose, but I liked it. For that reason, I'm going to give it a 6.5. I'll just get right to it. Above average for me, but also kind of like, there's just a lot of things I would prefer to listen to. But then again, like if I was in some sort of like crisis or in a bad mood or just was working out for some ungodly reason, this would probably be the album I might want to turn to. It's just like I said, onslaught, #onslaught. Just a really, really heavy album, but definitely understand the appeal. Just a smidge outside of my comfort zone, but lot to like about it, and particularly because the members of this band that I had the opportunity to meet were so awesome. I will continue following their releases as time goes by. I have a feeling we're going to be a bit further apart on scores on this one.
Yeah, I like it more than you. And listen, we're not going to see eye to eye on everything. I think there's power metal albums that you may have as a 9 that I probably have somewhere in the the 6.5 or 7 range. This to me is a 7.75 and trending up. I kind of almost want to give it an 8. I won't, but that's just because I want to spend even more time with it. And I think that it's gotten better with every single listen, truly. And that is remarkable. I just see the future being so bright for a band like this, especially with bands like Orbit Culture doing full headline tours in the US and stuff. These guys are too good not to be at the top of the genre. And quite frankly, they're already close to it. So kudos to them. They also tour incessantly, and that is a wonderful thing. They are out there, they're making themselves known. I remember when they used to open a lot of tours, and now they're able to headline. So they're doing the right thing. Kudos to them. Nothing but the best of luck. And I look forward to new music from them when it comes out, whenever that might be. So that is the self-titled Rivers of Nihil album. I want to mention just one or two news items which are not only relevant, one particularly relevant, the other just interesting. We talked about Suicidal Tendencies relatively recently. They've announced their new drummer, Xavier Ware, who is replacing Jay Weinberg, who had been in the band for a while. Curious to hear what they sound like. Whenever you got a new man behind the kit, it can really change a band's sound. So that will be interesting. And I'm obviously best of luck to them. But the other news item is even more interesting. We've always talked about Frontier Records and the Frontier Records sound, almost like there are bands that you could listen to and be like, this band is clearly on or should be on Frontiers because of the way they structure their music and because of that melodic nature. Frontiers has done something a bit interesting. Over the last couple of years, they've expanded their repertoire in many ways, bringing in bands from different genres. They've actually created a new, quote, extreme music label called Black to Black Records. And I found this interesting because I think they're probably going to go after bands that may not be the typical Frontier bands or fit that style, but they've opened up an entire new outlet for bands that are looking to get albums released and have the backing of a label behind them. And so Black to Black Records comes out. I don't know if you'd heard of this, but I think this is a wonderful thing, just to have the ability to have more extreme music on a label that isn't Frontiers, because it just doesn't fit with their core sound that they've been doing for a long time now.
It makes complete sense, especially, do you want to appeal to a wider audience, and there's definitely an audience for that style of music. But at the same time, like you said, your label's known for a particular sound. So, it's a nice way of almost having like a side project for a record label side project, so to speak. But, it makes complete sense. You never want to pigeonhole yourself. And so this is a nice way of reaching another type of fandom.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So kudos to them. We will see what happens. I'm curious to see what bands get picked up by them. There are so many unsigned bands out there that need help getting their name out there, and I'm all for it. I hope that it works out not only for the label, but for the bands themselves. With that said, first and foremost, a big thank you to all the listeners. Give us a like and a follow. If you're hearing us for the first time, consider obviously joining our Patreon, and we really appreciate the support we get there. But I am looking outside my window behind me, just over my left shoulder, and it is a whiteout out there. There is a snowstorm that is hitting New York City as we record this. I am hoping to catch a flight to Miami so that I can go on 70,000 Tons of Metal later this week. When we next speak again on the podcast, we'll be recapping that trip, talking all things 70,000 Tons of Metal before we get back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. I feel like you have not selected an album in 6 months. I am so curious to see what you're going to choose for your next album, just because it's been a while. So I am looking forward to that immensely.
I've actually made my choice while we were recording. It dawned on me that there was something that was on my list anyway that happens to be it's celebrating an anniversary. The anniversary is actually going to be a little bit closer to now, us speaking as a present time. But I'm going to be fashionably late on this one and choose it anyway, because it's something I've wanted to talk about anyway for a while. And so I feel like this has given me as good a reason as any. I'm not going to tell you how long the anniversary is, so that it's a little bit more of a mystery. And obviously, I'm not going to tell you the name of the band, but we will get there in a couple of weeks. It'll be cool to kind of get back to our regularly scheduled programming, because the beginning of this year has been pretty chock full of special episodes and things that don't involve us picking albums. So looking forward to getting back in the swing of things, and looking forward to seeing what you have to give to me to listen to. So good start to 2026, though. I will say, really fun conversation so far. A great recap of 2025. A celebration of our 300th episode. Just lots of good stuff. So we carry on.
Onwards and upwards, my friend. Be safe, and I will see you soon.
All right, take care, buddy. Ahoy.